The Silicon Valley evening was unusually quiet, the kind of stillness that made the hum of distant traffic feel like a whisper. Jennifer Carter, a 48-year-old tech mogul and CEO of Carter Tech, a company valued at $250 million, stepped out of her sleek office building in Palo Alto, her heels clicking against the polished concrete of the parking lot. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the rows of luxury cars, and the faint glow of her Tesla Model S beckoned her like a beacon of familiarity after a grueling 14-hour day. Her mind was still buzzing with the details of an upcoming $500 million merger with a group of international investors, a deal that could redefine Carter Tech's place in the tech world. She adjusted her tailored blazer, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, and reached for the car door handle, her thoughts drifting to the stack of contracts waiting on her desk. The merger was the culmination of years of work, a testament to her relentless drive to build Carter Tech from a scrappy startup in a cramped garage to a powerhouse in artificial intelligence. But as she opened the door, a sharp, high-pitched voice sliced through the silence like a blade. "Shut up and don't say a word!" Jennifer froze her hand, still gripping the door handle, her heart lurching into her throat. The voice came from inside her car, a place that was supposed to be her sanctuary, her private bubble of control in a chaotic world. Her first instinct was to slam the door and call security, but something in the voice, urgent, almost desperate, kept her rooted to the spot. Her eyes adjusted to the dim interior of the Tesla, and she saw him, a small figure crouched in the back seat, barely visible in the shadows. It was a boy no older than 7, his dark skin blending into the leather upholstery, his wide eyes glinting with a mix of fear and defiance. His clothes were tattered, a faded hoodie and jeans that were a size too big, but his gaze was steady, locking onto hers with an intensity that belied his age. "They're listening," he whispered, his voice dropping to a barely audible hiss as he pointed subtly toward the towering glass facade of Carter Tech's headquarters behind her. "Your partner and that lady with the fancy hair. They said you'd be here right now." Jennifer's mind raced, her pulse hammering in her ears. She glanced over her shoulder at the building, its illuminated windows glowing like eyes in the dusk. Her partner, Brian Thompson, had been with her for 12 years, a charismatic man with a knack for closing deals and a smile that could charm anyone. The lady with the fancy hair could only be Emily Harris, her executive assistant of 8 years, whose meticulous organization and warm demeanor had made her indispensable. The idea that they were plotting something sinister was absurd. Yet the boy's words carried a weight that made her stomach twist. She slid into the driver's seat, moving slowly to avoid spooking him, and closed the door with a soft click. "How did you get in my car?" she asked, keeping her voice low, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror to study him. The boy, who introduced himself as Jaden, shifted slightly, his small frame tense. The cleaning guy left the door unlocked when he was wiping down the cars. "I saw it open and slipped in. I was hiding 'cause I heard them talking about you up there." He pointed again toward the building, specifically the 12th floor, where Brian's corner office overlooked the valley. Jennifer's fingers tightened around the steering wheel, her knuckles paling. She wanted to dismiss this as a prank, a kid's overactive imagination, but the specificity of his words gnawed at her. "What did you hear, Jaden?" she asked, her tone calm but firm, as if she were negotiating a boardroom deal. Jaden leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "They said tomorrow's the big day, that you're gonna sign some papers and lose everything. The man, Brian, I think said you're too trusting, like a puppy following a treat." The lady laughed and said, "After tomorrow, you'll be out and they'll be running the show." Jennifer's breath caught a cold shiver running down her spine. Tomorrow was the merger meeting, a deal Brian and Emily had orchestrated, with almost obsessive precision. Every document, every clause had been prepared by them, and Jennifer had trusted their expertise implicitly. The thought that they could betray her after all these years felt like a punch to the gut. But Jaden's wide, earnest eyes held no trace of deceit. "What else?" She pressed her voice steady, despite the storm brewing inside her. Jaden hesitated, his small hands fidgeting with the hem of his hoodie. "They said you're smart but blind, that you don't see what's right in front of you. The lady Emily, she said the investors are in on it, that they're not really here to merge, but to help them take over. They called you. Well, my grandma told me not to repeat mean words, but it wasn't nice." His voice wavered, and for a moment he looked younger than his 7 years, a child caught in a world far too big for him. Jennifer's mind spun, piecing together fragments of the past few months. Brian's late-night meetings he brushed off as client dinners, Emily's insistence on handling the merger contracts herself, the way they exchanged glances when they thought she wasn't looking. She'd chalked it up to stress, to the high stakes of the deal, but now those moments felt like warning signs she'd ignored. "Why are you telling me this?" "Jaden," she asked, turning slightly to face him, her voice softening. "You don't know me. Why risk getting in trouble?" Jaden's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror, and for a moment they seemed to hold a wisdom far beyond his age. "'Cause I know what it's like when people think you're nothing," he said simply. "They were talking about you like you're invisible, like you don't matter. My grandma always said if you see someone getting hurt, and you can help you do it 'cause one day it might be you." His words hit Jennifer like a wave, stirring something deep within her, a mix of gratitude, anger, and a strange sense of pride. This boy, a stranger who owed her nothing, had risked his safety to warn her. She glanced at the building again, noticing the lights on the 12th floor flicker off one by one. Brian and Emily were likely heading down now, confident their plan was airtight, unaware that a 7-year-old had just thrown a wrench into their scheme. Jennifer's phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out to see a text from Brian. "Hey, Jen, all set for tomorrow. The investors are pumped. You're gonna shine as always." The message was warm, friendly, the kind of thing Brian had sent 1,000 times before. But now it felt like a snake's hiss. She showed the screen to Jaden, who squinted at it and snorted softly. "He's lying right to your face," he said, shaking his head. "He's got some guts, huh?" Jennifer couldn't help but smile, a genuine one that felt foreign after the tension of the moment. "Yeah, he does," she murmured, typing a quick, cheerful reply. "Can't wait, Brian. Let's make it happen." She hit send, her fingers steady, despite the fury simmering beneath her calm exterior. She turned back to Jaden. "Where do you live, Jaden? I need to make sure you're safe." He shrugged, a gesture so casual it broke her heart. "Nowhere special. Sometimes at the shelter on 5th Street, sometimes just around. Depends if there's space or if the other kids are being jerks." Jennifer's chest tightened at his words, the reality of his life clashing with the polished world she inhabited. She started the car, the Tesla's quiet hum filling the silence. "You're not going back to the street tonight," she said firmly. "We're getting you some food, and then we're figuring this out together." Jaden's eyes widened, a mix of surprise and suspicion. "You're not going to call the cops on me, are you?" he asked, his voice small but guarded. Jennifer shook her head, meeting his gaze in the mirror. "No, Jaden. In fact, you might have just saved everything I've worked for my whole life." As she pulled out of the parking lot, the lights of Carter Tech's headquarters faded behind them, but the weight of Jaden's words lingered. Brian and Emily thought they had her cornered, that she was a naive CEO who'd sign away her legacy without a second thought. They didn't know she had just found an ally in the most unlikely place, a boy who'd seen through their lies when she hadn't. Jennifer drove through the quiet streets of Palo Alto, her mind racing with questions. How deep did this betrayal go? What exactly were Brian and Emily planning? And why would a 7-year-old risk everything to help a stranger? The answers she sensed would change not just her company, but her entire perspective on trust, loyalty, and the kind of courage that comes from the most unexpected places. 20 minutes later, they sat in a cozy diner off El Camino Real, the kind of place that smelled of greasy burgers and strong coffee. Jaden devoured a plate of fries and a milkshake, his small hands moving with the efficiency of someone who didn't take food for granted. Jennifer sipped a soda, her untouched burger growing cold as she watched him. Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from Emily. "Jen, contracts are all prepped for tomorrow. You're gonna love how clean this deal is. Trust me, as always." The words, once comforting, now felt like a blade disguised with honey. Jennifer showed the message to Jaden, who rolled his eyes. "She's worse than Brian," he said through a mouthful of fries. "She's all sweet, but it's fake as heck." Jennifer chuckled, marveling at his bluntness. "You're pretty sharp for a kid," she said, leaning forward. "What else do you know about them?" Jaden wiped his hands on a napkin, his expression turning serious. "They were in that big office with the glass walls. I was hiding under a desk, 'cause I sneak in sometimes to stay warm. They didn't see me, but I heard everything. Brian said the investors aren't real partners, they're in on the plan. Something about moving money through fake companies. Emily said you'd never notice, 'cause you're too busy being the face of Carter Tech." He mimicked her voice, adding a mocking tone that made Jennifer's jaw clench. The audacity of their betrayal was staggering. Brian, who'd stood by her side through every major milestone, who'd toasted her at company galas. Emily, who knew her schedule, her passwords, her coffee order by heart. They'd been plotting under her nose, exploiting her trust to dismantle everything she'd built. Jennifer leaned back, her mind shifting into the strategic mode that had made her a titan in tech. "Jaden, do they know? You heard them?" she asked, her voice low to avoid drawing attention from the diner's sparse late-night crowd. He shook his head. They were too busy laughing about you. They think they're so smart, but they didn't even check under the desk." His lips curved into a small, proud smile, and Jennifer felt a spark of admiration. This kid with nothing to his name but a quick mind and a brave heart had outsmarted two people who'd spent years perfecting their deception. "You're incredible. You know that," she said, her voice genuine. Jaden shrugged again, but his cheeks flushed slightly. "Grandma said I got her brains. She used to say, when you got nothing, you gotta notice everything." Her phone buzzed again, Brian this time with a voice message. She played it on low volume, his smooth baritone filling the space between them. "Jen, just checking in. Emily and I are burning the midnight oil to make sure tomorrow's perfect. Rest up. Okay, you just need to show up and sign where we point. We've got this." The arrogance in his tone, masked by fake camaraderie, made her skin crawl. Jaden raised an eyebrow. "He sounds like he's selling you a bad car," he said, and Jennifer couldn't help but laugh, the sound easing some of the tension in her chest. "You're not wrong," she replied, her mind-eye already racing through her next steps. She needed more than Jaden's word to take on Brian and Emily. She needed evidence, a plan, and someone she could trust to dig into the shadows they'd been hiding in. Her thoughts turned to Michael Reed, a private investigator she'd worked with years ago to vet high-profile clients. Michael had been let go by Brian, who'd claimed budget cuts, but Jennifer had always suspected there was more to it. Michael was too good, too thorough, and Brian had never liked his probing questions. She pulled out her phone and found his number, her thumb hovering over the call button. "Jaden," she said, looking at him across the table. "I need to make a call, but I'm not leaving you alone tonight. You're coming with me, and we're going to figure out how to stop these two." Are you in Jaden's eyes? Lit up a mix of excitement and determination. "I'm in, Miss Jennifer. Let's make 'em wish they never messed with you." As she dialed Michael's number, the diner's neon lights cast a warm glow over them, a stark contrast to the cold betrayal waiting back at Carter Tech. Jennifer didn't know exactly what Brian and Emily had planned, but she knew one thing for certain: they'd underestimated her, and they'd never seen Jaden coming. For the first time in years, she felt a fire igniting inside her, not just anger, but a fierce resolve to protect what was hers. And as she looked at the boy across the table, she realized that this fight wasn't just about saving her company. It was about proving that trust, even when betrayed, could lead to alliances that change everything. The fluorescent lights of the all-night diner on El Camino Real flickered faintly, casting a sterile glow over the chipped formica tables and the half-empty coffee mugs scattered around. Jennifer Carter sat across from Jaden, the 7-year-old boy who had just turned her world upside down, with his warning about a betrayal brewing at the heart of Carter Tech. The clock on the diner's wall ticked past 10 p.m., and the air smelled of burnt coffee and fried onions, a grounding contrast to the surreal storm in Jennifer's mind. Her phone lay silent on the table, but the messages from Brian Thompson and Emily Harris still burned in her memory, their fake warmth masking a plot to strip her of her $250 million company. Jaden, his small frame hunched over a plate of fries now reduced to crumbs, watched her with those sharp, perceptive eyes that seemed to see through walls. "You're thinking hard, Miss Jennifer," he said, licking ketchup off his fingers. "What's the plan?" Jennifer managed, a small smile impressed by his directness. "The plan," she said, leaning forward, "is to find out exactly what Brian and Emily are up to before they know we're onto them. But we need help." She tapped her phone, pulling up Michael Reed's contact again. The private investigator's number glowed on the screen, a lifeline to the truth she needed. Jennifer hit the call button, her heart thudding as the phone rang. Michael picked up on the third ring, his voice gruff but familiar, carrying the weight of someone who'd seen too many lies. "Jennifer Carter, calling me after, 3 years? This better be good." She could hear the faint clink of a glass in the background, maybe whiskey and the hum of a TV. "Michael, I need you," she said, cutting to the chase. "It's about Carter Tech. I think Brian and Emily are planning to screw me over in tomorrow's merger." There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "Well, damn, I always knew Thompson was slippery. What's the deal?" Jennifer glanced at Jaden, who nodded encouragingly as if he were a seasoned partner in this conspiracy. She recounted Jaden's story, the boy sneaking into her Tesla, overhearing Brian and Emily's plot to trick her into signing away her company, their mocking words about her being a trusting puppy. Michael listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he let out a long whistle. "You got a hell of a situation, Jen, and a hell of a kid. I'm in Palo Alto. Meet me at the Blue Moon Cafe on University Avenue in 20 minutes. Bring the boy." Jennifer hung up her mind, already mapping out the next steps. She looked at Jaden, who was sipping his milkshake, his eyes darting to the diner's entrance every few seconds, as if expecting trouble. "You okay with meeting someone who can help us?" she asked. Jaden nodded, his expression serious. "As long as he's not like Brian or Emily. I don't trust people who smile too much." Jennifer laughed, a sharp, genuine sound that cut through her tension. "Michael doesn't smile much, so you'll like him." She paid the bill, leaving a generous tip for the tired waitress, and ushered Jaden out into the cool night air. The streets of Palo Alto were quiet. The tech hub's energy muted after hours, but Jennifer's senses were on high alert as she drove to the Blue Moon Cafe. her Tesla gliding silently through the city. Jaden sat in the back, his small hands clutching the seatbelt, his gaze fixed on the passing lights. "Miss Jennifer," he said suddenly, "why do people like them do stuff like this? I mean, you're their boss. Don't they owe you?" The question caught her off guard, piercing through the fog of her anger. She glanced at him in the rearview mirror, his young face illuminated by the dashboard's soft glow. "Some people think loyalty is just a word, Jaden," she said after a moment. "They see trust as a weakness to exploit, not a bond to honor. Brian and Emily. They've been with me for years, but I guess they saw a chance to take more than they earned." Jaden frowned, processing her words. "My grandma used to say people who steal what's not theirs end up with nothing but regrets." Jennifer nodded, her throat tightening at the wisdom packed into such a small body. "Your grandma sounds like she knew a lot about people." Jaden's lips twitched into a small smile. "Yeah, she did. She said I got her brains, so I better use them." The Blue Moon Cafe was a low-key spot, its neon sign buzzing faintly above a glass storefront lined with mismatched tables. Michael Reed was already there, sitting in a corner booth, his broad shoulders hunched over a steaming cup of black coffee. He was in his late 40s with salt and pepper hair and scars on his knuckles that hinted at a past rougher than his current life as a private investigator. His sharp blue eyes flicked up as Jennifer and Jaden entered, sizing them up with a practiced glance. "You must be the kid who's shaking up Silicon Valley," he said to Jaden, his voice dry, but not unkind. Jaden crossed his arms, studying Michael right back. "And you must be the guy who's going to help Miss Jennifer not get robbed." Michael's lips quirked, almost a smile. "Fair enough. Sit down, both of you." Jennifer slid into the booth, Jaden beside her, his small frame barely taking up space. She recounted the story again, filling in details Jaden had shared Brian's comment about her being a puppy, Emily's laughter about the investors being in on the scheme, the mention of fake companies to move money. Michael listened, his fingers drumming lightly on the table, his coffee untouched. When she finished, he leaned back, his expression hard. "I never liked Thompson," he said bluntly. "When he fired me 2 years ago, he said it was budget cuts, but I knew he didn't like me sniffing around his side deals. I've got some dirt on him already, but nothing solid enough to nail him. Until now." He pulled a tablet from his battered leather bag and swiped through a few screens, revealing spreadsheets filled with numbers and dates. "These are transactions I flagged before I left Carter Tech. Small amounts, nothing obvious, but they didn't add up. Shell companies offshore, accounts payments to vendors that don't exist. I'd bet my left hand Brian and Emily have been siphoning money for years." Jennifer's stomach churned as she scanned the tablet. The numbers were staggering: over $6 million in questionable transfers over 3 years, funneled through companies with names like Tech Vision Solutions and Global Nexus Partners. She recognized some of the names from contracts she'd signed, trusting Emily's assurances that they were vetted. "How did I miss this?" she muttered, more to herself than to Michael or Jaden. Michael shrugged, his tone matter-of-fact. "You're running a company, not a detective agency. They knew you trusted them, so they hid it in plain sight. But this merger, that's their endgame. They need your signature to legitimize the transfers, make it look like a clean deal. Once you sign, they'll push you out, probably with some cooked-up scandal to discredit you." Jaden, who'd been quiet, leaned forward, his eyes bright with curiosity. "So they're stealing her money and her company? That's like double bad." Michael chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. "Double bad is right, kid. But they're sloppy. They didn't count on you." He turned to Jennifer. "What's your play? You go into that meeting tomorrow without a plan. They'll have you signing your own death warrant." Jennifer's mind was racing, the pieces of the puzzle clicking together. Brian's late-night calls, Emily's overly detailed emails about the merger, the way they'd pushed her to focus on big-picture stuff while they handled the details. She'd been blind, but not anymore. "We need more evidence," she said firmly. "Something undeniable. Emails, recordings, anything that shows they're planning to betray me." Michael nodded, his eyes narrowing. "I can dig deeper, but it'll take time. Problem is, your meeting's tomorrow afternoon. We've got maybe 12 hours to pull this off." Jaden piped up, his voice eager. "I can help. I know how to sneak around their office. I can listen again, maybe record them on your phone." Jennifer's heart skipped a beat at the thought of sending a child back into danger. But Jaden's determination was unshakable. "It's risky, Jaden," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "They can't know you're involved." Michael raised a hand. "I'll keep an eye on him. I've got equipment, small mics, a burner phone. He can plant them and I'll be close by. No one's touching the kid on my watch." Jaden grinned, clearly thrilled by the idea of being a spy. "I'm good at hiding, Miss Jennifer. They never saw me before, and they won't now." Jennifer hesitated, her instincts torn between protecting Jaden and needing his help. His courage, his willingness to dive into this mess for her, a stranger, stirred something deep within her. She nodded slowly. "Okay, but you listen to Michael and you stay safe. Promise me." Jaden held up his pinky, a solemn gesture that made her heart ache. "Promise." She hooked her pinky with his, sealing the deal. Michael leaned forward, his voice low. "Here's the plan. I'll pull everything I can on those shell companies tonight. Jaden, you and I will hit the office early, before Brian and Emily show up. We'll plant a mic in Brian's office and one in the conference room. Jennifer, you act like everything's normal. Reply to their texts, smile, play the part. They can't suspect you know anything." Jennifer's phone buzzed and she glanced at it, a new message from Emily. "Jen, just double-check the contracts. All set for you to sign tomorrow. You're gonna make history with this deal." The words, so polished and professional, felt like a slap. Jennifer showed the message to Michael and Jaden. Michael's jaw tightened. "She's laying it on thick." "They think you're clueless," Jaden snorted, crossing his arms. "They're the clueless ones, calling you a puppy. They're gonna find out you bite." Jennifer smiled, a spark of defiance igniting in her chest. "You're right, Jaden. They've underestimated both of us." As they left the cafe, Michael handed Jaden a small backpack with the recording equipment, explaining how to use it in simple terms. Jennifer watched them, marveling at the unlikely team she'd assembled: a grizzled PI, a street-smart kid, and herself a CEO who'd been too trusting for too long. The drive back to her apartment was quiet. Jaden dozing in the back seat, his small snores a reminder of the stakes. She let him sleep on her couch, tucking a blanket around him, his face peaceful in a way that made her chest tighten. This boy who'd risked everything to warn her deserved more than a life on the streets. But first, she had to protect her company and herself. Back at her apartment, Jennifer sat at her kitchen table, her laptop open, digging through old emails from Brian and Emily. She found nothing obvious, but the sheer volume of messages about the merger, insistent, overly detailed, made her skin crawl. She replied to Emily's text with a breezy, "Looks perfect. Thanks for the hard work. See you tomorrow." Then set the phone down, her hands trembling with a mix of rage and resolve. Michael texted her a few minutes later. "Got a lead on one of the shell companies. We'll confirm by morning. Get some rest." Rest was the last thing on her mind. She looked at Jaden curled up on the couch and felt a surge of determination. Brian and Emily thought they'd outsmarted her, but they didn't know she had a 7-year-old detective and a relentless investigator on her side. Tomorrow they'd learn just how wrong they were. The morning sun filtered through the glass walls of Carter Tech's headquarters in Palo Alto, casting sharp reflections across the polished marble floors of the 12th floor conference room. Jennifer Carter stood at the head of the sleek mahogany table, her tailored navy suit immaculate. Her expression a carefully crafted mask of calm confidence. Inside, her heart pounded like a war drum, but she'd spent years perfecting the art of composure under pressure. Today, that skill would be her greatest weapon. The clock on the wall read 1:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the scheduled meeting with the international investors, a $500 million merger that Brian Thompson and Emily Harris believed would be their ticket to stealing her company. The air buzzed with the faint hum of anticipation, the room prepped with stacks of contracts, a gleaming projector, and a tray of artisanal coffee that Emily had insisted on ordering. Jennifer's phone buzzed with a text from Brian. "Jen, we're ready to make history. Investors are on their way. Just follow our lead and we'll crush it." The words dripping with fake enthusiasm made her stomach twist, but she typed back a quick, "Can't wait," and pocketed the phone, her fingers steady, despite the fire in her veins. She glanced out the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Silicon Valley skyline sprawling below, a testament to the empire she'd built from nothing. 12 years ago, she and Brian had started Carter Tech in a cramped garage, coding late into the night, fueled by cheap coffee and big dreams. Emily had joined 8 years later, her organizational genius turning chaos into order. They'd been her trusted allies, her family in the cutthroat world of tech until last night, when a 7-year-old boy named Jaden had shattered that illusion with a warning from the back seat of her Tesla. Now, with the help of Michael Reed, a private investigator with a nose for lies, and Jaden's fearless cunning, Jennifer was ready to turn their betrayal into their downfall. She adjusted her blazer, her eyes scanning the room for the hidden microphones Michael and Jaden had planted before dawn. The tiny devices tucked under the conference table, and in a potted plant near Brian's chair, were her insurance policy ready to capture every word of the trap she was about to spring. The elevator dinged, and Brian strode in his tailored suit and megawatt smile, as polished as ever. "Jen, you look like $1 million," he said, clapping her on the shoulder with a familiarity that now felt like a violation. Emily followed, her blonde hair swept into an elegant updo, her arms laden with leather binders. "Everything's set, boss," she said, her voice warm, but her eyes darting to Brian for a split second, a tell Jennifer would have missed a day ago. "The investors will be here any minute. Just sign where I marked with the blue tabs and we'll be golden." Jennifer nodded, her smile practiced and serene. "You two have outdone yourselves," she said, gesturing to the neatly arranged documents. "Let's make this a day to remember." Brian grinned, oblivious to the edge in her voice. "Oh, it will be," he said, winking. Emily set the binders down, her movements precise, but Jennifer caught the slight tremble in her hands. They thought they had her exactly where they wanted her, a trusting fool about to sign away her legacy. As Brian and Emily busied themselves with last-minute preparations, Jennifer's mind flashed to the early hours of the morning. Michael had met her and Jaden at her apartment at 4 a.m., his tablet loaded with damning evidence, bank records showing $6. $2 million funneled through 19 shell companies' emails between Brian and a shady consultant outlining plans to discredit Jennifer post-merger, and a recorded conversation captured by Jaden's hidden mic, where Emily laughed about how Jennifer's too busy playing CEO to notice we're robbing her blind. The evidence was ironclad, but Michael had warned her, "They're slick, Jen. You need to catch them in the act. Make them admit it in front of witnesses. Otherwise, their lawyers will twist this into a misunderstanding. That's why the mics were in place. Why Michael was stationed in a van across the street, listening in real time, and why Jaden was hiding nearby, ready to record any last-minute scheming. The conference room door opened, and 3 men in sharp suits entered the investors, led by a man named Hiroshi Tanaka, whose firm had been pushing the merger. Their smiles were polite but guarded, and Jennifer's gut told her Jaden was right. They weren't here for a partnership. They were part of Brian and Emily's plan, likely paid to play along until the ink was dry. Ms. Carter Tanaka said, extending a hand, "We're eager to finalize this deal. Your company's reputation precedes you." Jennifer shook his hand, her grip firm, her smile unwavering. "I'm sure it'll be an unforgettable day," she said, her tone light, but laced with steel. Brian clapped his hands together. "Let's get started, shall we, Jen? Why don't you take a seat, and we'll walk through the terms." Emily slid a binder toward her, the blue tabs glaring like warning signs. Jennifer opened it, pretending to skim the pages, her heart racing as she waited for the right moment. "Before we dive in," she said, standing and moving to the projector, "I want to share something I found last night. A little context for today's deal." Brian's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but he recovered quickly. "Sure, Jen, go for it. Always love your presentations." Emily nodded, her expression a perfect mask of encouragement, but her fingers tightened around her pen. Jennifer connected her laptop to the projector, her movements deliberate, and clicked to the first slide. A spreadsheet filled the screen, rows of transactions labeled with names like Nexus Global and Tech Vision Solutions. The room went silent, the investors exchanging glances. "These," Jennifer said, her voice steady, "are transfers totaling $6 million over 3 years, funneled through shell companies that don't exist. Care to explain?" Brian laughed, a forced, nervous sound. "Jen, what is this?" "Some kind of joke. Those are standard vendor payments vetted by Emily." Emily nodded vigorously. "Exactly, Jennifer. You approved these yourself. I can show you the records." Jennifer clicked to the next slide, a screenshot of an email from Brian to an unknown recipient, Carter's clueless. "Once she signs, we'll pin the losses on her and push her out." The color drained from Brian's face, his charm evaporating. Emily's pen dropped clattering on the table. "This is a misunderstanding," she stammered, her voice high-pitched. "Those emails are taken out of context." Jennifer didn't flinch. "Context," she said, clicking again. The screen filled with a grainy photo of Brian entering a bank in the Cayman Islands, followed by another of Emily signing documents for Nexus Global. "You've been stealing from Carter Tech for 3 years, Jennifer said, her voice cold. "This merger was your final play to launder the money and oust me, but you made one mistake." The door opened and Michael Reed walked in, his broad frame filling the doorway. Behind him were 2 federal agents, their badges glinting under the fluorescent lights. "You underestimated me," Jennifer finished. Her eyes locked on Brian's. Michael set a box of files on the table, his voice calm but cutting. "These are records of 19 shell companies, all linked to you too. We've got bank statements, forged contracts, and recordings of you planning to screw over your boss." He pressed play on a small device, and Emily's voice echoed through the room. "Jennifer's too busy playing CEO to notice we're robbing her blind. Tomorrow she'll sign, and we'll be set for life." Brian's face went red, his fists clenching. "This is bullshit!" he shouted, standing so fast his chair tipped over. "You can't prove any of this." Emily, pale as a ghost, tried to salvage the situation. "Jennifer, you're blowing this out of proportion. Let's talk privately." Jennifer cut her off. clicking to the final slide, a video, grainy but clear, of Brian and Emily in his office that morning, laughing about how Carter's too trusting to see it coming. The investors shifted uncomfortably, Tanaka's polite smile gone. "Ms. Carter," he said, standing, "if this is true, we cannot proceed with the merger." Jennifer nodded. "It's true. And I have more recordings, emails, witnesses. The feds have everything they need." The agent stepped forward, one addressing Brian and Emily directly. "Brian Thompson, Emily Harris, you're under arrest for embezzlement, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit corporate fraud." Brian lunged toward Jennifer, his face twisted with rage, but Michael stepped in his hand on Brian's shoulder, his grip like iron. "Don't make this worse," he growled. Emily collapsed into her chair, tears streaming down her face, her perfect facade shattered. "Jennifer, I didn't mean for it to go this far," she sobbed, but Jennifer felt no pity. She remembered every late-night email, every "you're the best boss" text, all while Emily plotted her ruin. The agents cuffed Brian, who was still shouting about lawsuits and getting even, and escorted Emily out, her head bowed. The investors left quietly, Tanaka muttering something about reassessing partnerships. The room emptied, leaving Jennifer and Michael alone, the weight of the moment settling over them. "You played that like a pro," Michael said, a rare grin breaking through his stoic demeanor. They never saw it coming. Jennifer exhaled, her knees weak, but her resolve unbroken. "I couldn't have done it without you. Or Jaden." At the mention of his name, the conference room door creaked open, and Jaden peeked in his small frame, dwarfed by the massive space. He'd been hiding in a nearby storage closet, recording the meeting on Michael's burner phone, just in case. "Did we get him, Miss Jennifer?" he asked, his eyes wide with excitement. Jennifer knelt to his level, her smile genuine for the first time all day. "We got him, Jaden. You were incredible." He grinned, holding up the phone like a trophy. "Told you I'm good at hiding." Michael ruffled Jaden's hair, his voice gruff but warm. "Kid, you're a natural. Ever think about being a PI?" Jaden laughed, shaking his head. "Nah, I just want to help Miss Jennifer." As they left the conference room, Jennifer's phone buzzed with a flood of notifications, calls from other companies already sniffing out opportunities now that Carter Tech's merger had collapsed. One message stood out from a rival CEO, "Heard about the drama. Let's talk real partnerships. No games." Jennifer pocketed the phone, her mind already shifting to the future. Carter Tech was safe, stronger than ever, without Brian and Emily's parasitic schemes. But as she looked at Jaden, skipping slightly as he walked beside her, she realized the day's victory wasn't just about saving her company. It was about discovering an ally in a boy who'd risked everything for her, a stranger who saw her when she'd been blind to the betrayal around her. They stepped into the elevator, Michael carrying his box of evidence, Jaden clutching the burner phone like a badge of honor. "What now, Miss Jennifer?" Jaden asked, his voice bright despite the long day. Jennifer looked at him, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and responsibility. "Now we rebuild," she said. "And we make sure you're safe fed and not sleeping in any more cars." Jaden's eyes softened, a flicker of hope breaking through his tough exterior. "You mean that?" he asked, his voice small. Jennifer nodded, her voice firm. "I mean it. You're with me now, Jaden." As the elevator doors closed, Jennifer felt a clarity she hadn't known in years. Brian and Emily had thought they could break her, but they'd only made her stronger. And Jaden, the boy they'd never noticed, had given her something far more valuable than a company, a reason to fight. Not just for herself, but for those who believed in her, and when she'd almost lost faith in herself. The Silicon Valley skyline shimmered under the late afternoon sun, its glass towers reflecting ambition and innovation, as Jennifer Carter stood on the balcony of her new office on the 20th floor of Carter Tech's expanded headquarters in Palo Alto. The air carried a faint breeze, tinged with the scent of eucalyptus from the nearby hills, and for the first time in months, Jennifer felt a quiet peace settle over her. It had been 6 months since the dramatic confrontation in the conference room where she'd exposed Brian Thompson and Emily Harris for their attempt to steal her $250 million company through a fraudulent $500 million merger. The fallout had been swift and brutal. Brian was sentenced to 10 years in prison for embezzlement and money laundering, while Emily got 7, their assets seized to repay the $6.2 million they'd siphoned from Carter Tech. The company, now free of their schemes, had grown 35%, its AI innovations attracting legitimate partners from across the globe. But as Jennifer leaned against the balcony railing, her thoughts weren't on stock prices or market share. They were on Jaden, the 7-year-old boy who'd climbed into her Tesla and changed everything with a single warning: "Shut up and don't say a word." Inside the office, Jaden sat cross-legged on a plush gray couch, his new school uniform, crisp navy blazer, and khaki pants making him look like a different kid from the one in the tattered hoodie she'd met that fateful night. He was engrossed in a math workbook, his pencil scratching furiously as he tackled fractions, his brow furrowed in concentration. Jennifer smiled, her heart swelling at the sight. She'd enrolled him in a private school in Menlo Park, one with small classes and teachers who saw his potential. But Jaden's transformation wasn't just about clean clothes or a good education. It was about the bond they'd forged, a connection that had deepened in ways Jennifer could never have predicted. She'd spent weeks after the confrontation digging into Jaden's past, driven by a need to understand why a homeless child would risk so much for a stranger. What she'd found had shaken her to her core, reshaping her life as much as his. It started with a name, Margaret Hayes, Jaden's grandmother, whose stories of fairness and courage had shaped his moral compass. Jennifer recognized the name from her childhood in Oakland, where her mother had spoken fondly of a friend named Maggie, a fierce community organizer who'd fought for affordable housing. When Jennifer cross-referenced records with Michael Reed's help, the truth emerged. Margaret Hayes was her mother's childhood friend, and Jaden was her grandson, left orphaned after Margaret's death 2 years earlier. The discovery felt like fate, a thread connecting Jennifer's past to the boy who'd saved her future. She'd sat Jaden down one evening, showing him old photos of her mother and Margaret laughing together at a community picnic. "Your family." "Jaden," she'd told him, her voice thick with emotion. His eyes had widened, then filled with tears as he hugged her, whispering, "Grandma said, family always finds each other." That moment had sealed her decision. She would adopt Jaden, giving him the home he deserved. Now, as Jennifer stepped back into the office, Jaden looked up, waving his workbook triumphantly. "Miss Jennifer? I mean, Mom, I got all the fractions right." His grin was infectious, and Jennifer laughed, crossing the room to ruffle his hair. "You're killing it, kiddo. Your grandma would be so proud." She sat beside him, marveling at how quickly he'd adapted to his new life. The adoption process had been finalized 3 months ago, in a small Palo Alto courthouse, the judge smiling as he signed the papers, noting, "It's rare to see a story that starts with betrayal, end with a family reunited." Jennifer had held Jaden's hand tightly that day, his small fingers gripping hers with a trust that made her heart ache. She'd promised herself and him that she'd never let him feel invisible again. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. Michael Reed entered, his familiar leather jacket swapped for a blazer, a nod to his new role as Carter Tech's head of corporate security. "Got the latest on our old friends," he said, setting a folder on her desk. Brian's still writing letters from prison, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. Emily's blaming him for everything, says she was coerced. Their appeals got denied last week. Jennifer nodded, her expression neutral. She'd read their letters, pathetic attempts at apologies, and tossed them without a second thought. They still don't get it, she said, her voice calm but firm. It's not about forgiveness. It's about moving forward. Michael grinned, his eyes crinkling. Spoken like someone who's already won. Oh, and 3 more companies reached out today. They want to partner on your new AI platform. You're killing it, Jen, Jaden piped up, closing his workbook. Told you, Mom. You're too smart for those jerks, Jennifer chuckled, the sound easing the lingering weight of the past. She'd spent years trusting Brian and Emily, believing their loyalty was as solid as her own. Their betrayal had stung, but it had also opened her eyes to the people who truly mattered, like Jaden, whose courage had saved her company, and Michael, whose dogged determination had turned suspicion into proof. Together, they'd uncovered a web of 19 shell companies, forged contracts, and secret meetings that had nearly cost her everything. But the victory wasn't just in saving Carter Tech. It was in what came after. Inspired by Jaden, Jennifer had launched the Jaden's Future Fund, a non-profit dedicated to providing education and housing for homeless children across California. The fund had already supported 150 kids, offering scholarships, mentorship, and safe places to live. Jaden, now 8, was its honorary ambassador, speaking at fundraisers with a confidence that belied his age. At their first event, a gala at a San Francisco hotel, he'd stood on a small stage, his voice clear as he told the crowd, I used to sleep on the street, but someone believed in me. Now I'm helping other kids get that chance. The room had erupted in applause, and Jennifer, watching from the sidelines, had wiped away tears, overwhelmed by his strength. She'd spoken after him, sharing their story, not just the betrayal, but the bond they'd built, the family they'd become. Sometimes, she'd said, the people you least expect become your greatest allies. And sometimes, the worst moments lead to the best beginnings. Back in the office, Jaden hopped off the couch, his backpack slung over one shoulder. Can we get ice cream after school? I aced my test, so I deserve it, right? Jennifer laughed, grabbing her keys. You drive a hard bargain, kid. Chocolate fudge, your favorite. He nodded, practically bouncing with excitement. Michael followed them to the elevator, his tablet tucked under his arm. You two are a hell of a team, he said, his voice gruff but warm. Jaden, you ever want a job as a junior PI? You let me know. Jaden grinned, shaking his head. Nah, I'm gonna be a coder like Mom. Gotta keep up with her. Jennifer's heart swelled, the word Mom still new but endlessly precious. As the elevator descended, she thought about the past 6 months, the whirlwind of court hearings, media frenzy, and corporate growth. Carter Tech was now valued at $325 million, its reputation bolstered by Jennifer's transparency about the scandal and her commitment to ethical leadership. But the real change was in her perspective. Brian and Emily had seen her kindness as weakness, her trust as naivety. They'd underestimated her, but more importantly, they'd underestimated Jaden, a boy they'd never noticed, whose sharp mind and brave heart had unraveled their scheme. His actions had taught Jennifer a lesson she'd carry forever. True strength lies in standing up for what's right, even when the odds seem impossible. She'd learned to look beyond titles and appearances, to value the people society often overlooks. Jaden, with nothing but his grandmother's wisdom and a fierce sense of justice, had given her more than a company. He'd given her a purpose, a family, and a reminder that the world is full of unsung heroes waiting for their moment to shine. As they stepped out of the elevator, Jennifer's phone buzzed with an email from the Jaden's Future Fund team. First scholarship recipients announced. 50 kids starting school next month, thanks to you and Jaden." She showed it to him, and his eyes lit up. "That's so cool, Mom. Can I meet them?" Jennifer nodded, her throat tight. "You bet. You're the reason this is happening." They walked out into the warm California afternoon, Jaden skipping beside her, Michael trailing behind with a rare smile. The scars of betrayal still lingered, but they were faint, compared to the life Jennifer was building now. She thought of Jaden's grandmother, Margaret, and her words about helping those in need. That wisdom had guided a 7-year-old to risk everything for a stranger, and it had led Jennifer to find a son she never knew she needed. The lesson was clear, and it wasn't just for her. It was for everyone who'd ever felt invisible, dismissed, or betrayed. Courage doesn't always come from power or wealth. It comes from the heart, from choosing to act when others turn away. Jennifer glanced at Jaden, who was now humming a tune, his backpack bouncing as he walked. "You know what, Jaden?" she said, stopping to kneel at his level. "You taught me something important. The world's better when we lift each other up, no matter who we are or where we come from." He tilted his head, his eyes serious. "Grandma said that too. She said helping people makes you family, even if you're not born that way." Jennifer hugged him, her eyes stinging. She was right. And we're family now, forever. As they drove to the ice cream shop, the Silicon Valley sun setting behind them, Jennifer felt a clarity she'd never known. The betrayal had nearly destroyed her, but it had also given her Jaden, a son who'd saved her in every way that mattered. The Jaden's Future Fund was her way of paying that forward, ensuring other kids had the chances he'd fought for. For those listening to their story, the message was simple but profound: trust in the goodness of others, even when it's hard. Stand up for what's right, even when it's risky. And never underestimate the power of a single voice, whether it's a CEO's or a child's, to change the world. Because sometimes the smallest acts of courage, like a boy whispering in a car, can spark a legacy of hope, justice, and love.